I am rejoined by Francesca Page here on our set at Newsmax TV, and we are joined by Skype out of Washington, D.C. by Tevi Troy, who is the president of the American Health Policy Institute and the former deputy secretary for the Department of Health and Human Services. Tevi, once again, we welcome you with good news. What's your reaction to Dr. Brantley's recovery? Did he beat the odds?
Well, thanks, JD, and I am so glad to see that Dr. Brantley is recovered, and I'm so encouraged by his compassion and his bravery in the way he helps people stricken with this terrible disease. I guess he did beat the odds of 2,000 or so people who have contracted Ebola that we know of, and about 1,200 dead. So the odds, if you get it, are not good. And at this point, we don't have a vaccine and we don't have a cure. So I hope that. And I haven't spoken to any doctors or anything like that, but I hope that the fact that he's beaten the disease means that he's now developed some immunity to Ebola in the future, and perhaps we can find in his blood, in his now immune blood, a key to solve the problem of Ebola in the future.
Tevi, can I ask you then, from that, what can his recovery be attributed to? We've talked about the experimental drug ZMapp, or would it be the acute care of this infectious disease in its specialty at Emory University, or is it a combination of both?
Yeah, it's a good point, and I don't think we know yet, and I think scientifically that's something we need to find out. But the fact that he did have this drug, and hopefully the drug is effective against it, but also the fact that there is high-level treatment in the U.S. It's one of the reasons why this disease is really raging out of control in Africa, but it's not a huge worry within the U.S. at this point, because we have good infection controls, because we know how to treat people, if not cure people who come down with it, and we know how to isolate them so that they don't spread it to others. So the fact that we are blessed here in the U.S. is a good thing, but that should not alleviate concerns about what's going on in Africa itself.
And speaking of concerns in Africa and beyond, Tevi, there are reports of suspected cases of Ebola in Asia. Are there any truth to those reports? And if they are true, just how concerning would be the outbreak of Ebola in Asia?
Yeah, well, first of all, we don't know for sure, and there have been a number of suspected cases in the U.S. that turned out not to be actual cases of Ebola. I think I've talked to you before about the problem of the worried well. When people hear about a disease, they suddenly feel that they have the symptoms, and that's not always correct. So I'm going to reserve judgment on the Asia issue, but obviously if it does spread to other countries and other continents, that is something we should be watching. I'm also a little concerned about what's going on inside Liberia. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal this morning that they're quarantining parts of West Point, which is a neighborhood where there's a lot of these the disease, at gunpoint, and you have soldiers kind of ringing the perimeter trying to keep people from getting out, and so that kind of civil breakdown stuff gets nerve-wracking as well.
Tevi, we've heard about a California patient being tested for Ebola. What do you think the likelihood is that this patient actually might have the disease, or is this, again, you're talking about the worry well situation?
Again, I can't know till the test results come back, so I don't know. Obviously, we live in an era of air travel and global travel, and this is how these kinds of disease can potentially spread. It doesn't mean you shouldn't fly, and doesn't mean you should hunker down in your home by any means, although I would be careful in going to Africa, and particularly West Africa these days. But the problem of diseases, of pandemic diseases, is that they can go global, especially with an airborne disease. And let me stress again that Ebola is not airborne, and it is transferred by bodily fluid, so it is not easy to contract. But again, if you have a place with poor infection controls, as you do in much of West Africa, then the spread is much more likely than you're going to have in some place with a more advanced medical system like here.
Tevi, I realize that hindsight can be 20/20, but a lot of respected people in the health community, we only have about a minute left, including Dr. Ben Carson, said it would have been better for Dr. Brantley to be treated overseas rather than bringing him back to Emory. Now, in retrospect, was coming to Emory the right thing to do?
Yeah, and I was not one of those people saying that he shouldn't come to the U.S. I mean, here's a man. He is a U.S. citizen. He is doing incredible work, or has been doing incredible work in trying to save people from disease in Africa. And I was okay with him getting the best possible treatment, which is at Emory, and
we'll
coming
have
back to the U.S., and I'm glad that was borne out.
Right. We will have to leave it there. Tevi Troy, as always, we thank you for your analysis. He was born Michael King, but his father changed his name in honor of the German Christian reformer Martin Luther. Martin Luther King, the subject of this American moment here on Newsmax TV.
January 15th, 1929 was a chilly day in Atlanta, Georgia, when a family gathered to welcome into this world a new life, and with it, a new hope for America. 2 years after his birth, his father Michael King changed his name to Martin Luther King, and then changed his son's name to Martin Luther King Jr. Throughout his 39 years, he instilled in Americans a new spirit of justice and freedom, based on equality instead of status, and character instead of race. He waged a nonviolent war on racial segregation, with appearances that radiated with an energy that transcended all races, all faiths, and people of all ages, with words that still resonate today.
I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
He spoke to us of his dreams and his beliefs that justice too long delayed is justice denied. You're watching An American Moment on Newsmax TV.